Welcome to the Second Bite podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome back to the Second Bite podcast. We have a little bit of a different flavor in today's episode. I have with me Barrett King from HubSpot, who's going to give us an interesting viewpoint from the inside looking out inside of from an ecosystem. So welcome, Mr. King, to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. Todd, I'm excited to have a chat with you. When we started talking about this discussion, I got to tell you, I was surprised at your insightful questions, not because I didn't expect them, but because you're thinking about this differently. And obviously that's so important right now, as certainly as HubSpot thinks about our scalability and growth, but certainly for your clients too. So I'm fired up. I'm glad to chat today.
Yeah, I mean, HubSpot is great. And, because we're going to jump into this pretty quickly, let me first say just a quick thank you, because the folks that sponsor our podcast are the people at TeamShares. And I don't know if you're familiar with them at all, but they're a very interesting private equity group out of New York. Their objective is they acquire a business for 90 or 100% cash at close. And then over the next 7 to 10 years, their objective is to get a majority of equity into the hands of the employees, which I thought was nonsense and sounded too good to be true. We've done one transaction with them, have another one in motion, and they're a great group of people to deal with. So for our friends at TeamShares, if you want to check them, you can go to teamshares.com. They're terrific. So let's talk about HubSpot. Here's what I know about HubSpot. We have been very fortunate. SmartBug is an elite partner. We did a great transaction with Ryan and the team over there. They're owned by American Discovery Capital. We sold Worth e-commerce to them. Bayshore Solutions is out of Tampa. We did a great transaction with Bayshore and Spinutech, which is in Iowa. And so I know HubSpot as a website and marketing automation tool that agencies use to generate recurring revenue, which they like, but also to deepen the relationship that they have with their customers. Am I describing HubSpot pretty well?
It's part of it. Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that's most interesting about the way that our platform in particular, so the actual technology itself, the software has evolved, is that we started as a marketing tool. We were actually a website grader, if you go way back in history to the early days, that evolved to do some email marketing, that grew into some automation, that kind of continued to scale into content, and eventually became a full-blown front office marketing tech stack. And in that context, one of the things we started to learn was that our most successful customers were working with agencies. And we can get in that story whenever you'd like to, but one of the kind of contextual points that's extremely important is that these agencies that they were engaging with were solving real world problems. The problems that frankly our customers were coming to us to start to augment and fix, right? So like, how do I better email market? How do I better automate and engage my customer? And over the last 15, 16 years, we listened to our customer. It's how we build our software, and it's all built from the ground up. Nothing was acquired and kind of stuffed in. Everything was actually crafted. What you see is that our customer base rather started to say, marketing's great. We're acquiring better customers and attracting better leads. How do we do more than that? And so now if you fast forward 16 years, HubSpot is an all-in-one solution. Now, like marketing speak aside, what does it mean? We take all the customer-facing roles, so marketing, sales, and CS, and bring them together on one same system of record. So if you look at who HubSpot is now, it's a CRM platform, a database system that we stack on top of that marketing, sales, and customer service tools. And then we wrap around that tool set a really awesome CMS, to your point, to build great websites. And then the other side of that same spectrum, an operations solution to maximize your data cleanliness and operational efficiency. And so what's cool about it and really interesting about it is that the agencies that we started with 16 years ago, 15, 16 years ago, some of them have evolved and they do more than what you're describing, which is email marketing and web content and website development, while others have said, I'm going to specialize in different avenues. So we can get into it, but it's really interesting now because it's a very dynamic tool set.
And you've got a real interesting view because you kind of came from agency life, marketing, digital. Or can you just give a quick background and then talk about what your role is within HubSpot now? Because I think that context is helpful.
Yeah, it's funny. I have such an interesting, I've been told, quirky, I think is the term someone used recently, background. So I went to school for digital design, digital media. This is back, I graduated in 2007, 8, somewhere in that neighborhood. So for me, at the time, it was learning about web development and 3D design. And it was some of the earlier digital tools that were coming to market. Photoshop was kind of blowing up and becoming the premier frontline tool, et cetera. I also built websites. I did a bunch of this stuff but the bunch of the functions that these agencies now that we work with actually do to provide value to our customers. And so when I left schooling, primary schooling, if you will, it was 2008 when like the world collapsed and things were not working out for recent graduates. So I actually went into restaurants. I had a friend at a restaurant and turned that into several years of restaurant management and opening restaurants. And so that's where like the kind of quirkiness and uniqueness starts to come in. Such an odd transition from digital marketing and media to like this guy's managing restaurants. But it was great.
And FYI, there were restaurants and bars in Southie for people that know the Boston area.
Yeah.
So that's an advanced degree.
It was an advanced degree. I got my master's in how to keep people happy and calm. It was a whole thing. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. And so what's interesting about it is, that's where I went from, I have this creative and technical and fundamental skill set to people. Right? I learned a lot about people. You certainly do. For anyone who listens to this, who's worked in and or around a restaurant or bar, you get it. If you haven't, you should. It's very interesting. But you learn the human dynamic, which is where I started to hone some of my core sales skills and some of just kind of the fundamental, chameleon, if you will, aspects of being a customer-facing person. And so for a period of time, I did that. Then I was in this kind of mid-stage Series B startup at one point. And that's where I got further away from restaurant, further toward marketing and sales. And so I spent some time, actually it was a little bit of selling and then actually managing events for this platform that eventually became Level Up, the payment processing company. But back in the day was this experiential kind of cool, funky company, did a bunch of different things. Later on in my career, so a little bit more in restaurants and some more tech companies, but I found my way to a tech company that was selling to restaurants. So sort of the marriage of previous career and then at the time, a more recent one. And what I found was that this is where I started to take and bring together, I think of them like Lego blocks. Like when you graduate primary school and you leave whatever that is, whether it's your high school, if you will, all the way up to doctorate. I think about that as that like green Lego mat that we all remember from being kids. And so we're all sort of level set, if you will, generally speaking, even unless you had a specialty, maybe you got your dentistry degree or whatever. So you became a lawyer. And if that was the case, you probably have like 3 or 4 of those blue 4x4 blocks already stacked up. So you've got a bit of a specialty. And so maybe you graduate and you go and you continue on building those blue 4x4 blocks as high as you can. I was the opposite. Like I didn't want to have one color and set of blocks. I wanted to have a variety. And it gave me range. And so I took all of this over the first maybe 7 to 8, maybe 10 years of my career and sort of tripped and fell and landed at HubSpot. I didn't want to come here. The company I was at, where I was head of sales, which is relative, there were like 30 of us, 35 of us, but I was head of sales. We were acquired by a company I had no desire to go work for. And I found myself sitting there saying, okay, I'm whatever I was, 27, 28 years old. I've got to decide what I want to do with my career next. And I had a buddy at HubSpot who said, you got to come here. I'm like, I don't know what that is. It's a weird name. What are you talking about? And why would I actually want to go to a 500 person company that's too big? 7 years later, we're almost 8,000 employees. And it's been an interesting journey along the way.
HubSpot has a reputation, at least from the people that I interact with, which are a lot of smaller CEOs and agency owners, of being a good business partner, right? And I mean from a business partner in terms of the economics they get from the relationship. Is that an important part of the design when whether it's Klaviyo or Microsoft or Bing or Google or any of them? Is that an important part of the consideration? And was it for HubSpot?
See, I think it's a smart question because I think it should be. I'm not sure it always is. So if you look at to fill the gap here, when I started at HubSpot, I was part of the team that was acquiring agencies and then building a book of business and helping them grow. And the mission vision that I was sold on, the reason I said yes and really wanted to pursue the opportunity here was the idea that we helped companies grow better. And in that context, it meant that I wasn't just selling somebody some software or a partnership, but I was selling a relationship that I would go on to manage and develop and grow and help them build a better business, scale a better business, which ultimately helped our customers grow better. And so I did that for a period of time. I did really well. I was tapped to go be our first head of sales training. I built out a global sales training program, helped other channel managers across the planet. We had 7 global offices. Now we have over 9. Go and figure out, how do I acquire the right partners? How do I build proper relationships? How do we don't use this term, but how do I consult them to grow better? What's most interesting about that dynamic is that HubSpot's entire ecosystem, really our partner program at the time and now our ecosystem, is predicated on this investment of people. And so my career personally, I was, again, head of training. Then I moved back. I managed some of our top partners, helped develop some of them, New Breed and the Brit Agency and Imagine Business Development, these really phenomenal firms that do incredible work. We all grew together. And I think to answer your actual question, the fundamentals of what has made HubSpot's program and programs like HubSpot's really valuable and unique in that sense is that we invest not just in can you sell our software and how much of our software can you sell, but what does it do for you as a business owner? What does it do for your family and your friends and your neighborhood, right? And your community. And so I think a lot of what you see, in particular when you develop at the scale that we're trying to now, the planning and the kind of forethought that goes into what does this relationship and dynamic look like is fundamental. Now, again, like I said, I don't think everyone does that. There are a lot of folks that certainly just say, like, we need to go and figure out, how do we break into a market? Let's go find 10 firms that are already there, that are already selling to the customer that's in our ICP, and let's go just partner with them and they'll sell our software. And I think those large IT resellers and those large, if you will, partners, I'm doing bunny ears, but like those folks that do that for you are phenomenal to break into a market or break into an industry. But that where you get the risk of sounding a little bit bold, like the diehard following, the people that are committed to growing with you, to working with you as an organization and figuring problems out, those folks are the ones that are getting massive value in return. And that value has to be outsized by what that individual person, that business leader, if there are 3 people in a basement with 1 computer, or it's 300 people in an office with, scale and hierarchy and whatnot. Each of those individuals, those organizations, those businesses have different needs, and yet the value needs to be the same. And that's that by working with HubSpot or insert company here, that they are better. I think that's the kind of the fundamental concept.
Well, and I see it true. So in my walk, we work with a lot of digital marketing agencies. And I think for a lot of them, and there's a bunch of examples, one of them, the Center for Sales Strategy, is a transaction we just did a couple months ago with a great private equity partner in Gemini out of Boston. They offer HubSpot because I think when they look around, or any other digital agency looks around, they say, how do we deepen our relationship in an important way that is more than just where did we rank this month? What was the return on our pay-per-click versus Facebook versus others? And it elevates the entire relationship, right? In terms of the agency and their client. And so my question to you would be, because it's fascinating that you have been the guy that does this, right, for HubSpot and helps these agencies. So let's take a small agency right now. What do you see are the most common traits in a smaller agency for them to be successful within HubSpot, which I think would, if they would automatically, by default, be doing a great job for their customers?
So we're thinking about small in terms of, human capital, how many people that work there, or even just total, value in that sense, how much revenue they're generating. I think one of the things that is really, for me at least, super exciting about that stage of growth. And actually, to be clear, I want to kind of frame this out. So when I think about size and I think about scale and I think about where an agency's at, I think about it in terms of their evolution. So for years, HubSpot and companies like HubSpot have said things to the effect of, you are this persona, right? We all know persona development, it's a common term. I think personas are valuable when you're looking at the macro. So you want to say, like, you're a primarily digital services agency that does a lot of like web design, for example. Great, cool. That puts you in a category, but it doesn't necessarily where you're at within that, sophistication, evolution, the growth of your business. So when I think about the persona that you're describing, the business size, I break down into 3 pieces. I say building, growing, and scaling. I think about it like building their go-to-market strategy, building their process, their team, their framework, building their business, growing their opportunity, growing a lot of their systems, growing a lot of their scalability. And then ultimately when they scale, at that point, you should have some of your act together in that sense. And so it's a math problem at that point. How many people, what type of services, how many computers to buy, that kind of stuff.
But and that's your job to help them work through that math, or you have people that support you to do that?
Yeah, it's funny. If you ask most people, for example, at HubSpot, they would say, I think this is true at any firm these days, any company these days, that my job is X, when the reality is like you also might do Y and Z.
Of course.
Right? You're spot on. That question's smart, because I think, if you look at the average perhaps channel manager, they're partnering with our channel consultants. And that pairing is really valuable because the channel manager is sort of offense, the channel consultant is sort of defense, and together we make up the collective, coaching team. These early stage businesses, in my experience at least, they're 9 out of 10 times they're building their go-to-market. Now, what's important is they may have been a business for the last, 15 or 20 years. They may have been very successful. They may have a $2.5 or $3 million, run rate. They're super happy. They have a great lifestyle. But 9 times out of 10, what I find the value that HubSpot brings to be most important is that we help them build a scalable, repeatable revenue stream that's predictable. It's really straightforward. We know inbound works. We know content marketing works. We know CRM at scale works and sales enablement tools. All of our different hubs and our tool sets and the ultimate sort of customer-facing stack that we've built help them help their customers. And so if you look at the ones that are joining the current partner program now and how they see value in the beginning, certainly, a majority of them are coming saying, listen, I've heard about HubSpot, or I've known about HubSpot. I've even consumed HubSpot content. I've got a customer or soon to be customer that I know would benefit from this tech stack. And when you see agencies winning, when you see these firms really winning, it's because they look at HubSpot as a part of the strategy they're developing for the customer. It's not a nice to have thing that I'll buy. It is very specifically the investment the customer will make in the output that they're looking for. And so if you look at the smaller firms, they're coming in saying, I don't know what I don't know. Let me learn a little bit about HubSpot. Let me learn a little bit about this tool stack. And they're working in conjunction with the team that they get, their CAM and their CC, as we describe them here, to master the tools, to learn the art and sort of the science of selling HubSpot and implementing and delivering on that value. And ultimately, the ones that are winning are the ones that figure out how to do that, with us and do it repeatedly over time.
It's interesting because by doing all of those good things for their customer, having recurring revenue, as probably everybody that listens to the podcast knows, makes their business more valuable because it's more predictable, because it will continue on regardless of who the owner of that agency is, right? So we were going to talk about the things that you see in a small or let's say an early stage, somebody that's getting their act together. What do you see as far as the traits that make them successful within the HubSpot ecosystem?
It's interesting. There would have been, if you asked me this a couple of years ago, there would have been an immediate reaction of they got to be adaptable. They got to be quick moving. I think it's almost the opposite at this point. I think they have to be inherently curious and ask questions. I think, the agencies that you're seeing come in right now, they've done their research. I mean, heck, inbound works, right? We've done our job. People know what we do here, right? We're kind of good at this marketing thing. We've been doing it for a little while. So now they know about our partner program and they've done some reading and some, case study consumption. And they've perhaps looked at our ecosystem or the marketplace and looked at what other folks and their peers are saying. So they're already educated. The questions that they should be asking are to themselves around how much will I lean in? And when I think about the most successful agencies and businesses that are joining our program, they have those expectations either met in terms of they've actually developed the plan, they know why they're investing, or they're open to a conversation around what that number and that metric value could be. And I think the problem in the opposite of that is that you come in saying, I don't know anything, tell me what to do. And of course, we're inclined, it's our sales team, it's our customer success team, they're incentivized to say, great, go sell and go service more, let's go. And if that partner doesn't know what their propensity for risk is or their interest in investment, I think often you see people get stalled in the in-between. Fear of failure. What do I do? How do I do it? Am I going to lose? I think the second piece that comes up most often too is trust, right? And that's hard because they don't know me or my peer in that sense. And in that context, again, I think you have to assume good intent. So the firms that I see, if you're asking me how do I join the program and win, I think outright it's actually a lot more simple than most people I talk to make it. And that's, I come in, I bring a customer or two with me, maybe 3. I've got some folks that I think could benefit, or somebody even like in the hopper, ready to go. I know they're going to win with HubSpot. In those first couple relationships, and you got to get to them quick. You got to get to them in your first 3 or 4 months. You got to onboard, sell and onboard 2 or 3 HubSpot customers to different parts of the tool. I think it's important to prioritize, take the skills you have now that you're good at and focus on that first. You're a great marketer, you're a great, CRM implementer, whatever your core skill is as a business. double down on that. But then, within 3 months, 4 months max, pick your head up. Okay, we've done 2 marketing interactions. We've had them come in, we've sold them HubSpot, we've developed and, implemented our onboarding plan. We've got perhaps a retainer or project in place. How do I continue to diversify and look down the road? So to kind of land the plane in this concept, one of the things that I think I would give everyone advice on, regardless of what partner program or ecosystem they're joining, is to solve for today, but really have the foresight to look at tomorrow. And so you've got your I used to have this manager, Kara Potter. Kara, if you listen to this, I miss you. You're great. Kara is one of my favorite people because Kara used to always say to me, wherever I was in my day, she'd see me in a hallway or, I'd be training like 100-person room or whatever. And she'd just blow up my moment and be like, how high are you flying right now? Like, what do you mean? She's like, what's your viewpoint? Are you at 500 feet? You at 1,000 feet? You look at this at 50,000 feet. And that's one of the things that I would impart on anyone joining, certainly HubSpot or other ecosystem programs, is I probably know what I need to do today. That's probably my 500, 1,000 foot view. But I should be looking the landscape of opportunity, from 10,000 feet, probably once a week, from 30,000 feet, probably once a month, and 50,000 feet, probably once a quarter. So I'm always thinking about the work and the impact that I have on my customer now is great. I mean, no disrespect by this, but so what? That's one. But if you join a program like this, at least in my opinion, it's a business decision on how do I grow better, faster, and build bigger revenue streams so that, to your point, I can be acquired, get sold, whatever it is.
I also find, and what I hear from a lot of clients, because again, if you look at CSS, Matt Sunshine's business in Dallas, they do, outsourced sales training work. And yet they have HubSpot because there's a need for it. But because it deepens the relationship, they can do a better job at, let's call it, what their core offering is. Kevin at Bayshore Solutions was a very traditional digital marketing shop. We also do HubSpot. And I think for any really good agency, they feel like if I could just be in charge without all the influence from the customer, if they would just follow my lead, man, we'll kill it here. And it feels like HubSpot really allows them, because it deepens the relationship and it enlarges the relationship, it puts them in more of a position to be that advisor as opposed to just a marketing guy.
Yeah, you're not wrong in that statement. I think the important part of, in particular, as you go into these more niche businesses, like the first example you gave of they are an outsourced training team. I think sales training is hugely valuable right now. I think people are winning when they hire firms like that to better develop their team. But if I think about that in particular business's opportunity, I would say if they're not thinking about 6 months or 9 months or 12 months from now doing the same thing for a CS org, that's a missed revenue opportunity. Because I think you could very easily go to the same, insert company here with 50 sales reps, and they're going to have 30 to 75 CS reps to support the customers those sales reps are bringing on, if not more, 100. Usually it's 2x. And so if that's the circumstance, then coming in with the value of how do I then go and expand my offering, in particular when they're finite. You're not going to go and do sales training forever at a business, most likely, in particular at the scale that you're looking for, because no one's hiring people that fast. You just can't fundamentally do it.
Right.
So you diversify, you do CS, you kind of blend out that way. The other side of the same coin, you talk about getting into a business and having a measure of certainly control, but I think influence is probably the better way that I would think about it. And I think that influence is valuable because what it does, it makes the agency stickier. We know that, hands down, that is a proven fact. But I think in tandem to being stickier, it does make them more impactful, like you highlighted. And in that impact, not only does that agency get to stick around longer, but they can charge more. And so, for years we talked about, and I learned a lot about this too, but we talked about the idea of value-centric pricing and not making it about what we're doing, but what we're delivering on. So it's not just you're going to pay for us to help you generate playbooks for your sales org. We're going to look at revenue now and then benchmark revenue every month for the next 6 months and look at how we've influenced the revenue output of your sales team. And so for a lot of firms, I think you join an ecosystem like HubSpot's thinking, I'm going to learn how to sell some software and maybe do some better servicing. But I think the real fundamental value comes in when you start to look at how do I provide better margins to my own business? How do I deliver more value? Because I fully agree with you. It's important to deliver that value to the customer. The customer is getting more value, which means you can charge more. And that helps you scale, that helps them win. It's a really nice mutually beneficial relationship.
When I look at the partner ecosystem, even at the diamond level, for example, I see some pretty small by revenue agencies there, and I see some pretty large ones. Can you talk about what you would see as the best path forward to become a diamond HubSpot partner?
Yeah, I'm going to start by saying something controversial. So I'm glad you're sitting down. This is important.
Excellent.
When you talk about, and to be clear, like I'm going to say it the way I'm thinking it, and then I'll kind of clarify here. But I think I see at least over the last 7 years here that, we have an agency right now, Naaman said, that came in and they were the fastest to get to elite. I'm like, great. Now what? What did you do along the way? Did you build a good business? Did you provide good value? Or is it marketable? Is it scalable? Is it profitable? And so I think what you see, and I believe this truly, is that the goal of diamond or the goal of elite should be married to what that does for your customer, what that does for you as a business, and where, by being at that level of standing in the ecosystem, can you deliver or consume more value from your peers?
And is that hard for HubSpot to measure and it to be controversial? Is it any of their business?
In terms of value, the value part of it?
Yeah, to the end customer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an extension of the mothership quite a bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the mothership is everywhere, ever knowing and watching.
I mean, it's certainly admirable, but if I'm bringing you customers, why do you care, how profitable or not, or this or that I am?
So we have a measure of managed MRR. It's a part of our tiering system. Everyone's aware of this. That's been around for a long time. And as we evolve, we've got a points-based system that we've evolved to. And there's a lot of evolution taking place in the ecosystem because of what you're describing, which is, as much as I could say, big business, we're just glad to have the sale. HubSpot in particular wants more than just the sale. They want a happy customer that sticks around forever, right? We're a SaaS company. At the end of the day, like, you stick around longer, we generate more revenue. You're happier, you buy more stuff. You're still happier, you buy more stuff. I think if you look at more than anything, the partners that figure out that that's part of the motion, what they're doing, so for me, here's a good example. I'll back up here. So for those of you that know the ecosystem, you've got New Breed Marketing. New Breed Revenue, excuse me. New Breed's been around forever. They're one of the original partners. And something like 6.5 years ago, when I inherited their business, they were, call it 30 employees, 35 employees, really, really solid. They were doing a great job. They had the fundamentals worked out. What was interesting about the opportunity was the scalability. And it came down to, if they continue to increase their opportunity set, their team size, the value they deliver to their customers, then they get more. They get more business from HubSpot. They get more, attraction from the market. And 4.5 years later, they're now 130 employees and a bunch more revenue, and they're growing, and they've got a real diverse, service set and whatnot. And I think when you kind of back up to that original point, when you look at the firms that are capitalizing on not just selling the relationship, the software, the relationship, the initial transaction, but the longevity, HubSpot wins, certainly, as I said, because we're a SaaS business and we sell software, and that's a win. But the agencies themselves, those companies are winning because fundamentally for them, their customer is happier and they stick around for a long time. So for us, I think, and I don't speak for HubSpot here, I speak for myself, but I think in a perfect world, we would be able to measure, customer happiness. We would be able to look at, how successful is that customer, which we have some things we can do, and surveys and NPS and tool usage and such like that. I think at the same token, it'd be great to look at how our partners are benefiting from it. And we do. We look at year-over-year growth, and the smart channel managers and channel consultants are together looking at the growth of each of those relationships, those partners. But I think there's a line of demarcation kind of drawn in the sand, and that's that I'm not a business consultant. Now, I will say openly on our, in our conversation here, if you asked Barrett of 7 years ago to have this dialogue, I was not even close to capable of having it. I knew how to sell some software, and I knew the basic fundamentals of a SaaS business. The education that I've received here, and a lot of our teammates do, is based off of the interactions they have with these agencies and with these customers. And so if you think about, and you kind of back up to the core ethos here, when you look at the true value of the dynamic, yes, the mothership might be looking at things, and yes, your camera CC, the relationships you have here might be over-examining, but if you assume good intent, then the output should be that your agency is more profitable, your agency is more successful, And frankly, at the end of the day, to be truthful, if you're not measuring this, if you're not looking at not just customer happiness and success, but the core metrics that are making you successful, are you profitable? How profitable are you? Are you looking at predictable, science-driven, scalable metrics so that when you think about your next hire, is it tactical? Is it intentional? And are you doing this with an output in mind? If you're mastering all of that, then sure, you're winning. If you're not, HubSpot looking at your customer happiness is sort of irrelevant at that point.
Yeah, and as I think you are saying, your best partners are doing that themselves because they realize it's important, right? I know the people at SmartBug do it. I know the people at Spin Your Tech do it. I know the people at CSS do it. It's a core metric, right? It's what makes a business inherently valuable from that standpoint. Can you, just as a couple points of curiosity, can you talk about or describe the difference between, from an agency perspective, being diamond and being elite, and now if you are elite, what that means for me as a business owner?
Yeah, so part of it is measure of engagement with HubSpot and with our customers. So it's things like, how much have you sold? It's things like how much have you serviced? Those are some of the core components in terms of how we measure it. It's also typically you see our diamond and elite partners doing a lot more of the certifications and doing a lot more of the programmatic work. So we've got things like partner outsourced onboarding. We've got things like, some of our other scalable systems. And so what you see, and I think this is perhaps a little bit unfair, but also the truth of the way the ecosystem evolved to right now, you see that some of our most committed in the way that HubSpot wants them to be partners are the ones that are at the elite level, that are at the diamond level. And that's not to say, for anyone who listens to this, that you're not committed at the untiered or gold, platinum level, but that those other levels show the measure of investment that you've made to date. And so I think for some folks, you asked earlier the question of like, how do I get to elite or diamond quickly? I think some folks look at that as, how do I get to a measure of visibility in the ecosystem fast? I think what you'll see HubSpot and companies like HubSpot that are building these ecosystems over the next couple of years do is diversify the measure of value. And so when you look at, elite 3 years ago, when we first, I think it was 4 years ago, we first released it. It was, the North Star, get there. Whatever you got to do to get there, get there. And there were a few, and they were exceptional businesses, and they were incredible partners to HubSpot, and they really committed. But as you add more partners, as you change the way that you measure value, it's the dilution effect, right? At some point, you'll have too many elite, and then what do you have like super ninja level next, or what is that next tier, right?
Right.
So what if you diversify and do it differently and say, perhaps we still have, and I don't know that this is the way we would go, but I'm just thinking out loud, like perhaps we still have these different tiers, but that the tiers are then categorized. And so perhaps in a world where you talked about that firm that came in and they were doing great digital work and they were doing some really good web work, what if they said we're going all in on web? And so they became an elite partner in the web space, which meant that they could handle large migrations and they could do really good project work. And they were super aligned to the way that our team sells and really just nailed pricing and packaging. I think if you look at the elite partners and the diamond partners now, the core differentiation is certainly economy of scale. They tend to be bigger. They tend to have more reach. But also I think there's a measure of, I'm generalizing here, but a measure of focus that, inherently comes with that commitment that they're making to being a member at that level. And so at the end of the day, if I were to distill it down, I really do think it's focus, it's intent, and it's setting very clear goals around, what it will take to get there, when you will get there, and programming it. We need XYZ sold, XYZ managed amounts, and backing it down to daily, weekly, monthly targets. And then getting there and then using that to your advantage, marketing yourselves bigger and better and stronger.
Sure.
And leaning into the ecosystem value.
And if somebody has the desire, that's listening and has a desire to do that, can they reach out to you and you'll get them connected with the right people to help them along? Is that too big of a bite?
No, I mean, it's not too big of a bite. I think the key thing is that they need to join the program. I mean, first off, like they need to join the program. I'm always happy to talk to agency owners and business owners that are looking to join the program just to share feedback and offer guidance and advice. I'm not an expert. I've just been here a long time. That makes me old in HubSpot years. But I think inherently with age comes, I guess, a little bit of wisdom, or so I've been told. The thing that comes up most often is the how And I don't have a good answer there. I never do. I don't think anyone really does, because each of those how stories is uniquely different. And so my advice would be ask a boat ton of questions. And actually, it's funny. I always go back to this too. If you haven't already, go read Traction by Gino Glickman, which frankly, and if I hope Gino never listens to this, but one of the most dry sets of books. EOS is an awesome implementation strategy and go-to-market tool set. Man, those books are hard to digest.
Yeah.
However, if you get through it, right? If you get through it, or you hire an implementer, but if you get through it, I think some of the most successful businesses that I've worked with subscribe to that methodology. And all it is like a very programmatic way of being intentional about running your business.
Right.
You nail that.
Hire an implementer is buy the book, read the first chapter, and then you'll hire an implementer.
Yeah, exactly. 10 words in, you're like, I'll spend 15 grand. Let's go.
Yeah. And so I think that it's, I know that there's plenty of tools within HubSpot. So for anyone that's listening, and it might be on Spotify or iTunes or whatever else, but if you go to secondbitepodcast.com, there's show notes for this episode, and the contact information for Barrett will be there, and the rest. A couple last questions. How does HubSpot feel in general about an acquisition? One, HubSpot acquires another, and that elevates them to Diamond or to Elite. Is that something that they embrace because there's greater capability to serve the customer, or how do they think about it?
I can speak for myself and my own experience. I certainly can't speak for HubSpot globally, but if I were to observe over the last couple of years, if you look back 5, 6, 7 years ago, people weren't being acquired. It didn't happen. There were conversations about it, but because the ecosystem was small and focused and fairly region specific, it didn't happen as much. I think a good example I can think of is Avidly in our EMEA office, and the brilliance behind that firm basically looking at, I think they were Diamond at the time, and I'm going to get some of these details wrong. So Joachim or Barbara, if you listen to this, sorry guys, I'm trying. But if you assume that, that they had the foresight to get this right, and they're both brilliant people, and the team around them is exceptional. They recognized that they were doing great, but so were some other people around them. And in my own memory and my own timeline here, that's the first moment that I can recall thinking, why are not more people doing this? They basically looked to their left and their right and said, they're doing well, let's buy them both. And they went from one agency to, I think they consolidated 3 more. So there were 4 of them. They not only diversified their services, but they actually expanded into different regions across EMEA. It gave them reach, gave them impact. And I'm not sure HubSpot would ever have a say in something like that. But if I were to make an assumption here, that there was probably a closed door conversation around, this is awesome, because the depth and range that one partner becoming, 4 becoming one, that you get from that as a result is huge. And the diversity of perspective, of content marketing, of email, talent, all of it is huge. And so I think there's probably a world, again, this is Barrett talking, but there's probably a world over the next 5 to 10 years where you see a lot more of that. And you certainly know, you're in the game yourself, that there are firms that will say, I've really nailed this art of digital marketing and I build really great websites. I don't know anything about CRM, but I know HubSpot has a huge TAM there. I know the opportunity around, even my local ecosystem is really big in my local market. So why don't I go and learn that? That's going to take you 2, 3, 4 years to build that team and do it right. Just go buy somebody. So if you can get the cash and capital to do it, and you can acquire, again, I can't speak for HubSpot, but if it were me and I was sitting in a room and someone said to me, Barrett, is this a good move for your partners? 100%.
Yeah.
Because not only does it help you scale better, but it makes you more valuable across our customer base. Because we've got this, said early on, but this unified tech stack, our enterprise down to our SMB and startup companies are typically utilizing several hubs. We know that, right? It's kind of widely shared knowledge, because as HubSpot's value grows, who knows where we'll be in 10 years, but if there's one thing that I do know, it's that we'll be servicing these customer-facing teams. And so if your agency can get to a place where you've got economy of scale, you've got good workers, they're paid well, but you're making good money off of them, you get the process and scalability built in, and then you can say tactically, I know my gaps, and what I want to do is become a proper full scope servicing business around HubSpot's needs, and in particular, meaning their customers. Then go look for everybody that does the things you don't do well today.
Right. And it's really interesting because if that sounds like an interesting approach, right? go getting the cash is the tricky part.
Yes.
However, depending on one's size, there are plenty of very smart private equity groups that would say, Barrett, all of that stuff you said is what we want to do. We just need the tactical partners on the ground. So depending on your size, and we know many of them that you could match up with to be your private equity partner and go acquire the group to your right and the group to your left. Conversely, if you're too small to be interesting to private equity, we know two right now that are looking for one on the right and one on the left. And so regardless of that size, we have a HubSpot agency right now that's smaller from that perspective. And everything that they want to accomplish will require investment that they don't want to nor have to make the investment. So they're just going to plug into somebody larger. And it's a woman that owns this agency. She said, geez, man, all of this stuff is what we want to accomplish. And now I get to do it all. I'm a part of a larger team. I don't have control over everything, but I do have control over my part of the world. And quite frankly, I had control over everything before. I didn't like it as much as I thought I did, right? From that standpoint. So it's been great having you here because HubSpot will continue, I think we're seeing it on a daily basis, will continue to play a more important role in the lives of customers at the end of the day because of all the things that you do and that you do well. And so to get a view from inside HubSpot out, I think is just enlightening for agency owners and CEOs that are trying to grow and to do a good business. And so again, they can reach you through the show notes that are on the website. They can reach me, of course, at Potomac Business Capital. All of our contact information is on the website as well. Let me just ask as we wrap up, Barrett, because you've had an eclectic career before and now within HubSpot. You've been successful in your business life and in your family life and the rest. Is there something that you would point to, whether that's a mentor or an experience? We talked about working in South Boston bars, or a book that you read that you would point to. You mentioned Traction as well. That would be something that you would point to that helped you accelerate your career to where you are now?
One of the most interesting questions I've been asked in a long time. So you get a star for that, and a gold star.
Excellent.
HubSpot's mission is to help millions of organizations grow better. And I remember hearing that from the first days of my time here. Before HubSpot, every company I was at had some sort of a mission. And I had a peer, I guess you could call him a mentor in some capacity, but a friend of mine, years ago, we were on this business trip together, and we had something like 8 hours in a car. It's a lot of time in a car. Somebody at face value, but that's a very intimate space. We'll say that. And I picked him up at 4:30 in the morning. We were going a couple hours away, and by 5:15, he was going a mile a minute. And one of the first things he said to me was, "What's your mantra? What's your thing?" Man, it's 5:30 in the morning. I have no idea what you're talking about. My reaction was probably what he expected. And he was like, "All right, here's the deal." They call me Baking back in the day because that's my email address, Baking at HubSpot. He's like, "Baking, here's the deal, man. Got to figure it out." I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. And he's like, "No, I'm serious. You're not getting out of this car until we're done." And so several hours, a lot of miles, and a lot of interesting conversation later, I figured out that I had this kind of 3-tiered system. It's family, freedom, and fulfillment. And so for me, that became my guiding light, the ability to provide for and prioritize my family, the freedom to be creative, the freedom to do really good work the way I saw fit, and then really to care about it. I needed to do work that fulfilled me, that had a purpose and had value. And so I didn't have this until, probably 4 or 5 years ago when I came up with it with his help. But prior to that, I think I always had this incessant drive. And that drive for me came from what you described, which is this kind of quirky, weird, kind of unique range in terms of my background. And then I don't know who I am or who I want to be, but I know that I'm happy with who I am and I'm happy with who I want to be today. And so I actually, this is unfair because I don't know Matthew McConaughey, but I would say if I did, I'd give the man a high five. He had this great speech. You can look it up. It's on YouTube. This is years ago at
Yeah, I've seen it. It's great.
Right? Where he goes through the whole thing of like, who's my hero? It's future me, everything else. There's not one book. There's a lot of books. There's not one conversation. There's a lot of conversations. But for Barrett King, for me as a human being, I get energy and value from people. And so the core thing that has helped me to become who I am is to be naturally curious, be very intentional about meeting and learning and growing from others. Try and be humble, be a little egotistical. That's healthy for you, but be humble about it where you can. But at the end of the day, fall madly in love with the problem. That's it for me, Todd. That really just like nails who I am at my core. I, in some ways, probably too much so at times, get obsessed with the issue, the problem, the opportunity. And other times, probably rightfully am out, right? But when you look at what, in my experience and opinion, the most successful people in business and life do, they recognize that it's not a balance, it's a blend. It's not equal. It's going to be ups and downs, but that their North Star, they really got to care about. And if you find that and you fall in love with the problem and you align all your vectors around it, that's how you win.
Man, that's great. If you're listening and not watching, no show notes or no cue cards on the family, freedom, and fulfillment. That was all right from the heart. So that was felt and great. Do you want to, should we thank the guy who you drove those 8 hours with? Who was that?
Yeah, Dan Tyre, I'm always happy to shout him out. Dan Tyre is an absolute HubSpot legend. He was one of our original salespeople. I think he was the first or second sales hire by Mark Roberge, our first CRO. And Dan is a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience, just a great human being. So shout out to Dan Tyre. If you all know him or don't know him, get to know him. He's really a great human being.
Well, it has been great having you on the podcast. Thank you for making time. Thanks for your insights and your wisdom. Thank you to our friends at TeamShares. And I will look forward to watching the continued growth and success of HubSpot, Barrett. So thanks a ton.
Thanks, Todd. It's been great. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.